Well, hello there, and welcome to Mission Unstoppable. I am your host, Frankie Picasso, and today we have a wonderful show planned for you. Before I get started, I just wanted to wish my father, Bert, his 96th birthday today. And this was a book that I had written about his life last year, and if you want it, it's available on Amazon. You can go read all about his extraordinary life. So happy birthday, Dad. We missed 2 birthdays because of COVID. It's horrible. He lives in Mexico. So I'm really, hoping to be able to see him really soon. But on with our show. Here we go. With us today, Brent, the guy with the big beard. he's a Good Radio Network's movie critic, but also with us is a lovely lady is Marcia. She's been a casting director for over 40 years. She's launched the careers of many notables, including Heath Ledger, Anne Hathaway, Chris Pine, Rachel McAdams, another Canadian, Paul Rudd, Amy Poehler, to name a few. Some of her credits include Clueless, 10 Things I Hate About You, 30-something, Princess Diaries. She's also been the executive vice president of Walt Disney for over 16 years. She is Marcia is Jeff's wife and partner in Floating World Pictures, where as a documentary film producer, she has produced such documentaries as Terrence McNally, Every Act of Life, The State of Marriage, Father Joseph, The Savoy King, Chick Webb, and The Music That Changed America. And her most recent film is Nasrin. Jeff Kaufman, next to her, is an American film producer, director, writer, illustrator, whose cartoons have even made it into the New Yorker and his illustrations into the LA Times. He is a former radio host himself, but he's most known for his documentaries, which he has produced, written, and directed, some of which include Every Act of Life, The State of Marriage, Father Joseph, The Savoy King, Chick Webb and the Music That Changed America, Brushed with Life, The Art of Being Edward Bieberman, and Education Under Fire. Of course, today we're going to be talking about his latest film, Nasrin. So I'm going to just give you a very quick high-level overview. We're going to be speaking in depth today about Nasrin Sotoudeh. She is an Iranian lawyer, a human rights activist, a wife, a mother, who in 2018 was sentenced to 38 years in prison, 148 lashes, because of her work defending women's rights. In 2020, she was one of the recipients of the 2020 Right Livelihood Award, widely known as the Alternative Nobel Peace Prize, for promoting political freedom and the rule of law in Iran. So welcome, everybody. It's so great to have you here.
Thank you for the great introduction.
Can we just start by saying happy birthday to Bert?
Thank you. Thank you.
That's a good milestone and many more to come.
When I was a little girl, I said, Daddy, promise me you'll live to be 100. So he's doing good on that promise.
Wow, he's getting there.
I hope he kept all his promises.
He did keep all his promises. That's why it's so hard to find a guy, a really good guy. Marcia, you can relate, right?
Believe me, I didn't meet him till late in life.
Yeah. Well, that's sometimes what it takes.
Yeah.
I know that Brent he's got a great partner too. So here we are. We're going to talk about this amazing film that you guys made, and you were never in the country, which is astounding. How did Nasrin come about? Social activist for a long time, I know, but.
Well, yeah, usually when we make documentaries, it's a very immersive process where you're there with the subject, and like we did this film about Haiti, and we were in the mountains of Haiti for months, and that's a very personal experience that you feel in your bones. But I'd done a whole bunch of documentaries about Iran and a number of films about human rights with Amnesty International, and it just wasn't possible to go to Iran without getting arrested. And also, if American crew showed up in Tehran to walk alongside Nasrin Sotoudeh, we wouldn't have had the access that we have in this film. I think when you see the film, you realize that thanks to these really remarkable filmmakers that we worked with, the access is something you've just never seen before. Nasrin Sotoudeh is someone the government is looking at all the time, and yet we're able to follow her and her family, not just to protest and not just to working with clients whose lives are at stake, but into bookstores and into an art gallery that looks like you're in Greenwich Village, and to the theater, to all aspects of life. And a favorite moment for Marcia and me, when Nasrin just is waiting outside for her son to come home from school, then they walk home hand in hand down the street. So that would not have happened if it wasn't for these remarkable crews that we worked with, who put themselves at some risk, just like everyone else in the film, to make it come alive.
Can I just add one thing to that, which is that when Jeff made Education Under Fire, which was a film that it was about the persecution of the Baha'i faith in Iran, which is how he first came across Nasrin, because she, as a Muslim woman, was defending her, Baha'i clients, and he was very taken with that. He found a way at that time, to work with filmmakers, far away. So, he understood how we could do this, so it was, it was a combination of a lot of different things. I mean, we knew what we were trying to get. And a lot of times, of course, and we'll talk about that later, the marvelous mystery of what turned up, particularly because we didn't speak Farsi. So it was a very, really wonderful process of making the film that way too.
You want to say something, Brent?
Yeah, you said you had trouble with obviously being able to get into Iran to do the work. Did you have any problems with getting the film out of Iran as a consequence?
Yeah, I really can't talk about the process of getting it out, but it wasn't the same every single time, and it was convoluted. And because, halfway through working with Nasrin, she was arrested, and not because she was doing the film, but because, this is while we were filming this. Major women's rights movement broke out in Iran called the Girls of Revolution Street. Revolution Street is a street in Iran where a number of women stood on electrical utility box and took off their hijabs. And just that act of doing that in public can send you to prison for 10 or more years. Mm-hmm. They put their hijabs on a stick and then stood on this box, and sometimes had a friend videotape them and wave the stick like a flag. It's just an extraordinary act of courage. And it's an action that took off across the country. And as you see in the film, like there's, mothers holding babies, and there's this old lady who must be in her 80s who stands up on a flower planter in a busy street. And think of all the history that's gone on in her life, and she takes off a hijab and waves it on her cane. It's just a remarkable experience and a remarkable social movement. And Nasrin became the lead spokesperson and lawyer for that movement, and was arrested for that and for other things while we were filming. So because she was all of a sudden locked away, besides the tragedy of it, which we feel every single day, some of the stuff that we had shot had disappeared. And we knew that it was there, we couldn't find it. And then months later, we were able to find out where it was and get it out. And but that just is not the typical process of shooting a documentary. But again, it all goes to show what's at stake for these people and the kind of walls we're trying to break through.
It's extraordinary. And a couple of years ago, I interviewed Marina Nemeth. She wrote Prisoner of Tehran. So she was also in Evin Prison. Horrible place to be. Nobody ever wants to be there. And she explained how, Iran, it is a beautiful country, and it's not always this way. There was times of freedom, and then the Ayatollah came and everything got very strict again. And so, it's hard to go from being able to wear your hair and your makeup and everything. Now you got to be all hidden again, and then, it comes off, it comes on. It's a really difficult way to live. But what
I
really
would just amend that, if I could, just like there were times of relative freedom. So there were more freedoms for women under the Shah, but the Shah was also a brutal dictator who imprisoned and tortured his perceived enemies as well.
Oh yeah,
so their rights. Yeah, we don't want to idealize those times, but certainly in contrast, and especially for women, it's a brutal time now.
Yeah.
Also, you just brought something up about it being a beautiful country. I mean, a couple of things. One of the things we really wanted to do was portray the rich, history and culture of Iran. It's a beautiful country, and I think, Jeff and I did travel around the world and do a lot of interviews in person. We couldn't go to Iran, but we interviewed other people, and I think, in addition to sort of this, the storytelling, how important the interviews were, we got a lot out of it in different ways. I mean, for me personally, meeting people who live in exile, who could never return to a country that they loved, and a beautiful country, and where they had family that they could never really see in person again, or worried about, because if they did anything, something bad could happen to them. This was very, very, very meaningful. And also we felt that, so often with governments, we only, what we read in the newspaper is all we know. And usually that's just what's reported government to government. You have no sense of the real people that live there and the day-to-day lives. And really we all share, as I like to say, a common humanity. And it was very important for us to capture that universality between people to people, not just government to government.
Nasrin, is a very, she's got this beautiful light about her, and she just seems like a very calm, peaceful person who's, you know, social impact, you know, her want to fight. She's so courageous, and she's just so steadfast, and she's got the most beautiful, loving husband and children. And it's amazing. And her husband, you know, is an activist too, but just off she goes. And it was so poignant for me to see her children grow up and hear, like, her daughter's what, 19 now, and she just looks so like such a young woman. And she missed a lot of her mom. Like, she missed so much of her life. And yet I think they were okay with that. The letters that went back and forth, you know, kind of showed that they both appreciated one another ability to stay steadfast and fight the good fight.
You know, sometimes social activists, politicians, people in the arts, they're so driven to do their work that they leave behind the human element in their lives. Even if their work is about the human element, they can't apply it to themselves.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things that's so striking for Marcia and me is, you know, just what good parents and what good people Reza and Nasrin are. Mm-hmm. And I think that's fuel for their work. But, you know, it's more rare than you'd think. And it's just lovely to see what, you know, good, caring people, their daughter Merava and their son Nima are. But you also have to realize that then, because Nasrin loves her kids so much, the sacrifice of being separated from them is just horrendous. But it's a sacrifice she feels she has to make.
What caught your attention? Sorry, Marcia,
I'm just saying he's a tremendous support system for her too.
Yes,
he's an activist in his own right and very dedicated to the same causes that she is. And, you know, that's one of the things we just love about them. You know, this sort of, you know, he's very comfortable, you know, being married to this dynamic, charismatic woman, and at the same time, and confident in his own role. And I love that about him. I nicknamed him our Marty Ginsburg. You know, Ruth Bader Ginsburg had this wonderfully supportive and accomplished husband, and he really believed in her career and encouraged her, you know, to get out there. And that you know, that's what Reza does.
Is he a unicorn? I mean, in that country, is he a unicorn? A husband?
What does that mean? I
know what she means. Well, you know, you're rare kind of a man that, no, you know, he would say no, because he's asked that, because he's such an incredible human being, and people just assume, well, there must not be a lot of men like that in Iran, but there are other men like that in Iran. I mean, you know, he might be a unicorn on the planet as an incredible husband, but as a man in Iran, I think, you know, he does represent that there are plenty of men there who really believe, you know, in the work and support their wives, you know, in this work. And as you'll see in the film, you know, you'll see at all these protests, when you watch the film as much as we do, you know, the same men are always out there supporting the work and out there with the protest signs. So, you know, he's not alone in his belief in what his wife is doing.
I just impressed, you knew the phrase, he's a unicorn. I didn't know what that meant. So.
Now you do.
Am I a unicorn?
Yes.
Yeah.
I'd be happy to be just a scruffy little puppy, but that's fine.
Well, you know, when we think of countries like Iran, and you think of the Ayatollah, and you think of, you know, stoning women to death and all the horrible things that you hear, and even imprisoning them with 138, 48 lashes or whatever, you think it's a misogynist country. You know, women are kind of like nothing. Well, that's the perceived thought, right? For us here in the West, who don't really know anything except what we hear, what we read about from other women. And so that's why, you know, I said, is he a unicorn? Because it does seem a little rare to me to have a man like that.
Let me just share one little connection to that. In the year 2000, the Violence Against Women Act was reauthorized in the United States Senate and House. And in the House, it got like 416 votes for it and 3 votes against it. This year, they're trying to reauthorize the Violence Against Women Act again, and something like 175 Republicans voted against it. So, you know, there tends to be this demonization of other countries, especially. One of the things we tried to fight in this film was a demonization, as Marcia was saying, of the people of Iran.
Right.
But first of all, this country, our country, every country has its own issues to strongly look at. And God knows, I mean, the discrimination against women financially and personally and physically in America, in this country, is horrendous.
I have to go off topic for 1 second. What do you mean that the Republicans voted against? What did they vote for then?
They voted against reauthorizing the Violence Against Women Act. The Violence Against Women Act is supposed to protect women against various forms of physical and emotional.
And they didn't think that was a good idea. Okay, just one more reason to hate the Republicans now.
Well, we won't use the word hate.
Well, I do, but I can't blame you.
I'm just not going to use the word.
Yeah, you don't have to use the word. You don't.
But it just goes to show the battles we have to fight here.
Yeah.
But again, one of our goals in the film for Marcia and me was to fight this sort of ignorance and demonization of the people of Iran.
Yeah.
And the people are separate from the regime. And so as Marcia was saying, with Reza, there are many wonderful men who are very supportive of women's rights. One of the people in the film who we just mentioned briefly is this guy named Dr. Farhad Mezameh, who is a doctor and a publisher and a great friend of Nasrin and Reza's. And he got arrested for wearing a pin that said, "I oppose the mandatory hijab." And he's in Evin Prison now because of that. So there are many allies that we also need to acknowledge.
Early on when we were working on the film, I had a conversation with someone, and she said something so interesting, because I was, a lot of the things you're talking about, there's questions that I have myself, because I've led a very free life here for, my life. And it's interesting because what she said, and I think it's really true, is that, a lot of the oppression of the women is this is the way the government actually also controls men. They empower men to have this horrendous control over the women in their lives. And this gives the government this other control over them. And so it's a really manipulative thing. And I guess, a lot of men are very susceptible, and we see it, to wanting to have power over women or power over anything,
any kind of power.
And that's a very universal thing in all cultures and in all ways. This desire for people to feel superior, have power over other people, making them feel empowered themselves.
Yeah, there's a phrase for it called othering.
Yeah.
It's you always want to hate the other. It makes you feel like you're special.
Brent, I think you want to say something.
Well, I want to, I've heard that, for example, were it not for the government in Iran, if you ask the actual population of the country, that they're probably one of the most westernized or westernized oriented countries in the region. Is that what you found through your work?
Yes, I mean, westernized is a complicated phrase in that they have their own rich culture, and we shouldn't assume that they're going to automatically always be American. But there is a lot of interest in American culture and American people, and sort of an innate support for those values, and therefore a lot of commonality if we can break through the governments not wanting to connect with each other, and also, by the way, our really difficult past.
Well, yeah, but also, I mean, the women there are so well educated. I mean, more women are college educated there than men. So yeah, I mean, they are, they know, and it's really unfortunate because they can't hold the same jobs and do the same things. And yet, they're far more educated than the men in many ways.
Well, and I had also heard that a significant portion of the Iranian population is quite young, and that they're, craving to see a lot of these changes implemented that have been enforced upon them that they just don't agree with anymore.
Yeah, and Brent, because you're a movie historian, that Iran has a very rich cinematic history.
Oh, absolutely, yes.
Yeah, very vibrant. And there's so many things that we can gain from each other. Again, if we just find ways to connect.
Nasrin actually talks about this twice in the film. And about this issue that there are so many young people. And how much, they're not happy. I mean, she does mention this, and certainly she is a real role model for so many young women who are protesting and taking risks. Because I mean, at a certain point, what do you have left? I think the world has changed so much with the internet, obviously, and everybody sees what's going on around the world. And so, it gets harder and harder for governments to have such control over people. And eventually, you know, who knows what's going to happen. It's unfortunate, but it's a tendency to crack down harder, you know, as opposed to give more freedoms, because, you know, because they don't want to give up their power. They don't want to give up their control. They don't want to give up the fact that they control all the resources.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things that Nasrin does, you know, talk about is she does everything within the letter of the law. She's not she's not an outlaw, you know, she's an in-law. And so yet here she finds herself in prison. I mean, she's a lawyer. Lawyers are supposed to protect people. They take clients, whether they agree with them or they don't agree with them. She happens to agree with them. However, you know, I mean, she fights within the law. The law is written by the land. And so, you know, for her to be imprisoned is it is unfair in a way if you're fighting within the law. So, you know, it's like there's a law, but then there's my law.
Yeah.
Right, and lots of lawyers are imprisoned there. You know, she does. I mean, that's what's really so remarkable about her. You know, she has tremendous respect for the law. I mean, you know, in the movie, you see like the scales of justice everywhere. Buying principle in her life, and you know, in the courts there, you know, I mean, they're not rational. You know, they just decide what they feel like on that day about what's good for them. They don't really adhere or follow the kind of law that we have to in some ways follow here. You know, I often think about, you know, the last election, and, you know, our courts, you know, our judicial system, our legal system, you know, stepped up, and the courts held up, you know, tremendous pressure. It could have gone either way. And in Iran, you know, that's not the case. The courts are part of the government, and they get to decide the outcome of everything. It doesn't matter what, you know, what the laws say or the people want.
But I think it's a very subtle point, and I love the fact that Nasrin deeply loves the law.
Yeah.
She won an award last year in December from the American Bar Association, the Eleanor Roosevelt Award.
Nice.
And she was out on temporary medical leave, as she is right now, and she was able to record a statement for it. And at the end of it, she says, you know, despite everything I've been through, I love being a lawyer. And the way she says it is just beautiful. And again, I think other countries see the assault on the respect for the law. And of course, the law can be whatever you make it. But her belief in the law, not, you know, violent revolution, not another country coming in and taking over,
right,
does a lot. And that's why I think she's such a good role model for the future for that country.
Did she have those lashes?
No. Not yet.
Thank God.
Yeah, but you know what happened? One of the things that happened was she was on a long hunger strike.
Yes, 38 days or something, wasn't it?
47 days, 47 days, and demanding that political prisoners who were in these COVID-infested prisons be released to their homes so they would not get sick. And as punishment, one day the authorities said, "Oh, we're going to take you to the hospital so you get some treatment." She was in Evin Prison, and they put her in a car and had her and drove her off. And she thought she was going to a hospital. Instead, they drove her out of town to a place called Marchant Prison. A women's prison about 90 minutes outside of Tehran, which has a reputation for being the most physically foul prison in the country. And within a week, she got COVID.
Oh, wow.
So, you know, she didn't have lashes, but they kind of made her get COVID.
Yeah. Wow. That's disgusting. I just feel for, she's 58 years old, isn't she? Mm-hmm. 58. Yeah. I mean, just imagine she's like, you know, close to our age, and she's going through this horrific event, and because of, you know, her value system, it's absolutely incredible. She's the most courageous woman, really, absolutely astounding.
And you know, she just really so interesting about her too, because she never wants it to be about herself either. I mean, everything she does is about others. You know, when we first approached her about doing the film, she, you know, and asked her what she thought about doing it. I mean, she said, it can't just be about me, you know, it has to be about the others and all the other people that have worked so hard, you know, and everything she's done. I mean, since she's been in prison, you know, the first short hunger strike she went on was because she had an elderly woman who was her cellmate, and she wanted that woman out because of COVID.
And others like her.
You know, but another's like her. Well, that was the first time.
Yeah.
But then the second time, you know, which went on and on and on, it was because of the health conditions, you know, and she, you know, I mean, we were worried every second she was going to die. It was so scary. but she did manage to focus a world attention, on the prison system, and the COVID and the health conditions. She did that with the fast. Everyone was writing about it. And then she was able to sort of, obviously it would have been a horrible thing if she died and she stopped, but not after, she made her point and some things changed.
Yeah. So do you think there's a way that the world, can get her out?
Well, first of all, let me just, for those who don't really know Nasrin, haven't seen the film yet, I guess I would be remiss if I didn't say that you can find out more about Nasrin and also how to see the film in countries around the world by going to the website www.nasrinfilm.com, nasrinfilm.com. And there's this easy link, so whatever country you're in, you can see it. And Nasrin and her husband would be the first to say that seeing the film is a really essential part of activism on behalf of her and others. But just, one of the things that I love about Nasrin is, and one of the reasons we wanted to make the film is because she's a Muslim woman. She was raised by a conservative family who loved her and believed in empowering women. But someone who has reached out beyond herself to support others. Marcia and I did a film that involved John Lewis, the great American civil rights icon. And one of the things I love about John Lewis is that he took his struggle for civil rights and realized that it was universal. So he applied it to being this wonderful supporter of women's rights and a wonderful supporter of LGBTQ rights. And Nasrin is a lot like that. Mm-hmm. She has been this great champion of religious minorities in Iran, where others are just terrified to do that. And for ethnic minorities in Iran, like Kurds. She supported Zoroastrians, the Baha'i community. And then, of course, also for women and children and fighting against the death penalty. She's just someone who isn't just interested in supporting a narrow base but really realizing that, as Marcia was saying, this common humanity that we all have. And that's why we felt really that she's such a universal
figure,
role, not just for Iran, but for America as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
And as far as being able to get her out, public pressure has made a difference. There's a couple of petitions on our website, one from Amnesty International, one from PEN America, that we urge people to sign.
Yes.
And again, families of political prisoners will say that shining a light is the most effective tool they have, that even repressive regimes don't want to be publicly shamed. And so the more voices that come together that demand Nasrin's freedom and others, the more difference it'll make. It really does give them some protection.
What kind of hope did making this film give to those who helped you in, film it?
Well, it's interesting you say that because, when we were making the film, pretty much it was just the two of us. We really kept things really under wraps for a long time because although, we were really concerned about Nasrin's, well-being, mm-hmm. and we didn't want anything to happen. And we asked her repeatedly, are you sure? Are you sure? And even when we finally finished the film, we were, are you edited and everything, we asked, and, are you sure? Because we didn't want anything to potentially endanger her or anybody else. And she was, fine. No, she was fine. And we raised money very privately. We didn't go for.
Yeah, you couldn't even fundraise publicly.
We didn't. I mean, until the film really had its official premiere in October in Boston, we did not have make any public noise about the film. And once we did that, it was such interesting, the feedback we got, particularly for us, from the Iranian community. It's been actually extraordinary how many people we've heard from and how many wonderful new friends that we've really made have been incredible friends to us in the project and the impact campaign that we've been doing around the world. The, how much it's meant to them to see their country portrayed this way. And that two Americans, not of Iranian descent, are showing their country that they love in this actual light and in this way, and in this really also not, sort of balanced way, and also out of, a real respect for these activists. So that I have to say, I think more than anything else, that has been it just very moving to me. And I mean, it's been really everything to me. And our American friends who don't know anything about Nasrin, they've really been introduced to her, and we've heard about so many people, and they feel so emotionally involved in what's happening with her. And, you know, they had no idea. I mean, many people didn't really have any idea like, that it's Snowden, you know,
Yeah.
in Iran, or, you know, people, oh, there's the Apple Store, or people did the iPad, you know, people just don't know those things. I mean, I knew very little about
Right.
Iran, except maybe like Cyrus the Great and, you know, certain other things, you know.
Yeah. Brent, did you want to say anything?
Yeah, I mean, one of the other things that really impressed me about this was what kind of respect that she gets from people who you wouldn't necessarily think right offhand would be the ones to be supportive of it. The case in the movie where she's meeting with the woman who was arrested for not wearing the hijab in public, you had talked about her coming from a very traditional family background, and yet they were willing to come forward and say, yes, we're supporting not only our daughter, but also her advocate in this particular case. And that speaks a lot to the credibility that she's got in a place where she's getting respect from places where you wouldn't think it would come from.
Yes, it's like Bert. It's good to have good parents.
Yeah.
But you're right. I mean, you know, it's so easy to sort of have this view of another country. You know, you get a story in the newspaper and a headline, and it's all kind of abstract and distant. And then you realize that every country is made up of real people. And someone like Nargis Hosseini, the young woman you talked about who took off her hijab and faced 10 years in prison for doing that, you know, she came from a conservative family like Nasrin, but they loved her and supported her, and they were there for her. And I hope that just that little tiny piece will make people realize, oh, Iran, I don't really know that country, you know, but there are good people there. Let's get to know it better. It's a doorway into something.
Yeah. There's good people everywhere. I mean, that's the whole thing. We tend to forget that.
And of course, bad people everywhere too.
We've met also, you know, a number of women.
There's Republicans.
And men and women since, you know, who are living, you know, in Canada and the United States, who were arrested, and she represented them. And they got out of the country, and it's really incredible to hear what they have to say about her, because they credit her so much with, you know, helping them get out, you know, helping them get out of prison.
Brent, can I ask Brent a question, and you
Sure.
too as well? I don't know if you saw it recently, but recently Jafar Panahi released this powerful video statement about Nasrin. And if you haven't seen it, I don't know if it's on our website, but I was thinking while we were talking, we should make sure it's there. But I'll send you a link so you can see it.
Great.
Awesome.
I loved his comments in the movie that he was saying about her too, and the way he.
That's what I was going to ask you. What did you think about? You know his work and how important he is. What did you think about that sequence of Nasrin and Panahi together?
Oh, I thought that was great. I thought that was wonderful. It was, you know, it reminded me of, you know, some of the American films where you see cameos, say, by politicians and so forth. You know, but just the fact that she made the appearance. And you could see, again, through that particular example, as you saw through many examples in your film, just the warmth and the compassion and the humanity that she brings to her everyday life, and how that then translates into her work as well. I mean, I think that's so important. You know, there have been a number of times over the years where I've watched various documentaries about activists in different countries, and it always shows them diligently going about their work, but it always is focused just on the work. And that's certainly fine, but there's a person behind that work in each of these cases. And the thing that I liked about your film is the fact that that came forward, and you got to see that's why she is the way she is.
Yeah, I particularly loved, you know, when all the cards that she would get from around the world, and she said, you know, these really helped sustain her. And then she framed them and put them around her office, some of them, the ones that were really special to her. She is an artist and she is a poet, and simple things make her happy. And that's really, you know, she's really just a beautiful person, really.
The first time Marcia and I met, which was not that long ago, 2012, was one of the things we talked about, besides our mutual love of Japanese art and documentaries, was certain filmmakers like Hal Ashby, and Michael Ritchie, who had this documentary background that they also brought into the narrative world. And I love like old movies like Howard Hawks and John Ford, with all these, you know, actors who have these rich moments. And Marcia's one of the great casting directors in Hollywood. Yeah. And so I think that love of narrative films where even smaller characters have that moment that sparks and you feel like they're a real person, and some understanding of narrative within the rules of a good documentary is something that's very important to both of us.
Yeah, having, I mean, when you can't, people say, what makes a movie star? Everybody wants to know. And really, it's something very simple, really. And it's called having a compelling quality. People want to watch you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, yes, there are many great actors who are movie stars, but in the end, you can be the greatest actor and not be compelling to watch on film. Or you can be an actor that's at the beginning of the career. Many people become much better actors over time, but what you can't really teach somebody, no matter how good they are, is to have that compelling quality that you just can't, you have to watch them. And so, and I think Nasrin has that. And
yeah, I do too.
That was important to us. We wanted to capture that. And, that comes from so much more than what a person says. It's something inside somebody that really makes a person compelling.
Yeah, she definitely is compelling. But you brought up Japanese art. So let's just take a second out from Nasrin for a moment and talk about Floating World, the significance of Floating World.
Oh, you got the reference. Okay. Well, let's explain to your listeners. So, yeah, I mean, I find Japanese woodblock prints, Hokusai Hiroshige, there's a second generation, an early generation, just so incredibly beautiful. And when Marcia and I met, one of those weird things in life where she also loves Japanese art. But prior to her, to meeting Marcia, I formed my little documentary production company, and I wanted to have a title. And I thought of either this Duke Ellington song I love called Sea Jam Blues, and then I also thought of Floating World, and I thought that's kind of perfect. And Floating World Pictures is Japanese woodblock prints, and it was this movement of art that was actually made for the common person, so you could have a print in your little home and afford it. And it was also very much about the moment, and there was a Buddhist element. Anyway, what can I say? It's called Ukiyo in Japanese, which translates to Floating World Pictures, and so we stole that name.
Well, you took it, but I said
she's not a thief. Marcia's not a thief.
Yeah.
No, but I went to Northwestern actually, and I was in the theater department there. But you had to take freshman English, but you could do these electives, and I took a class on the history of Impressionism because I always, was really interested in it. And one of the things the teacher talked about was Japanese woodblock print art, and how the French Impressionists were deeply influenced, by at that time it was the Japonism, where they were all, Japan had opened, and this art was coming out, and there's sort of the juxtaposition of the colors, which is very impressionistic, but it's also the woodblock print, and also these depictions of daily life and the theater, and and so I got very, very interested in that then. And so I had all these books and everything. When we met, it was so strange because it was
kismet.
And we finally, in 2019, we went to Japan finally. We were talking about it. We'd never been. And it was like, this is the year. We planned the trip for a year. Thank God we got back. We got back in October of 2019. If we'd gone any later, we could never have gone.
That's right.
It was pretty remarkable to be there.
But there's something actually really significant about that connection too, which is that in Iran, there is a strong conservative element that's actually even in the Constitution that opposes any so-called Western influence. I have a friend, Hala Esfandiyari, who is an Iranian American scholar who worked to bring our cultures together, who, when she went to Iran to visit her aged mother, was arrested. And I remember reading the Iranian Constitution as part of that process of trying to get Hala out. And it was clear that, just the idea of trying to have that connection between these cultures was something that was
abhorrent to them?
Highly opposed. What's the word? I'm trying to think of the word. And anyway, there's some word that I can't find, but you understand. And here in the United States, we see the same thing with a lot of conservative forces that believe in American exceptionalism, and let's keep them out. And our culture's perfect. They have no understanding of how much our culture is based on other cultures. And so,
that's what's so funny about it.
And I know I'm going on and on about it, but here we're talking about the influence of Japanese art, but it changed all of Western art. And usually when cultures and civilizations take that next step, it's because they've connected and melded and fused something and built on that. And that would be awfully nice to do now.
I love that. Yeah, and it's so true. I mean, Americans don't realize, I mean, they don't travel as much as other people usually anyway, but I find that, once you go outside of that little lock, another world opens. So every time you avoid change, you stay closed, but you look for change, and it opens up to the next step, and that's pretty amazing. I think, I always wanted to be a documentary filmmaker, so like, I'm getting my little taste in here. It's so good because I just love social impact. And I love Nasrin. I love her figure. I love what she represents for women, for LGBTQ, for just everybody. I mean, there's a little piece of her for everybody, and that's what's so very special about her. And I did want to talk to you just for a second, though. I don't know. Did you want to say anything else? Sorry, you can jump anytime, Brent. But Father John, the film that you did, is it Father John?
Joseph.
Yeah, Joseph. Sorry. Yeah, in Haiti, because that really interests me too. Can you touch on that for a sec?
Do you want to?
No, you can do that.
Okay.
Well, why you made that film? Why you said you want to make that film?
Yeah, I'd done, prior to that, I had just done this jazz documentary about Ella Fitzgerald and the influence of 1930s jazz in Harlem and how it sort of really changed a lot of America. And then I'd done this film about Iran called Education Under Fire. And I was really thinking about trying to do something that was about economic justice, but also about faith, and I don't know. And sometimes you just have this strong feeling you want to do something, and then if you're lucky, something comes your way. And I was at this this meeting of folks, and I bumped into this priest that they had brought from Haiti to talk about development in Haiti, and it was Father Joseph. And I was like, wow, that's really interesting. He was talking about this university he'd founded in the mountains of Haiti, that led to doing a documentary about Father Joseph's work. And he's this Catholic priest from Fondwa, which was actually the epicenter of the earthquake in 2010. And Father Joseph really dedicated his whole life to trying to empower women. And so he was the first person educated in his family, but he ended up founding Haiti's largest microfinance bank and just changing, tens of thousands of lives. So when we first met, one of the things I said was, "Hey, I'm about to go to Haiti," and that's a really good line if you're looking for to pick up someone.
Well, and I just right. So and then I got involved with all this. I mean, I was still casting. I left Disney, and I was at Disney for 16 years, and I running the feature casting department there. And then I left in 2011. I went back into my own business. My daughter was still in high school. And I always wanted to do something else. And like yourself, I love documentaries. I've been going to the Sundance Film Festival for years. And I always made a point of going to see a few documentaries, even, though my main focus was finding acting talent. I just love documentaries. No matter what, I would learn something. And so I ended up going with him to the New York Film Festival with his previous film. And it sort of dawned on me that, oh, wait a minute, there's kind of a whole thing, making documentary, it's very hard to make documentary films, as you probably know. I mean, there's, the raising the money and all of the things that go into trying to get it made. But it's actually, what's really hard is getting your movie out into the world and getting it seen. And I think a lot, for a lot of filmmakers, what happens is, you expend so much time and energy and everything just getting across the finish line of getting your film made without really a plan for what are you going to do for the film. And so when I went with him to the New York Film Festival, on the other side of things, as a companion dating, as opposed to, casting director looking at talent, I really got a chance to see, what was going to happen to the life of the film. And, I had, I don't know, I guess for being a studio executive for so many years, I've been around all these things, because when you're an independent casting director, and I still cast while I was at Disney. It's just the film and finding the talent. But when you're a studio executive in casting, there's many more things. You make the budgets, and you go to see the dailies, and you're really exposed to all these other aspects of filmmaking that I hadn't been before. And so I kind of got involved really in the beginning of like, we have to look at this as a business, and how are we going to sort of give these films the life that they deserve. You know, we're so emotionally committed, but the film needs the life. And then, you know, and also the subject matter really interests me, because I'm also interested in people who do things in the world that make a difference in the lives of other people, you know, even at sometimes great expense to themselves, or, you know, at sacrifice. I mean, yes, there is obviously Nasrin, but the women in our marriage equality doc, and Terrence McNally, you know, the kind of work that he was doing that was very risky, but it was transformational, you know, for other people.
Yeah.
And not necessarily, you know, brought them a lot of attention, but made changes for others. And I really like telling those stories. I think those people who make a difference in the world and have great purpose, you know, they're important. Yeah. And I also feel, you know, and I feel this way about Nasrin, you know, history books are written a lot of times by men, and, you know, women's stories, or people's, or, you know, or white men even, you know, and people's stories don't get told. And yeah. I think for Jeff and me, we really wanted to be able to give voice to certain people so that their story was going to be told, you know, through their vision and their work.
Can I also just brag on Marcia for a second, if I could? Because I remember when we were at the New York Film Festival for this doc I did, which did well there, but wasn't well served by the infrastructure around it. And we went to this lunch or dinner with a couple other filmmakers, and Marcia was sitting next to me, and she was talking to the producer of this other documentary. And I just remember having this light bulb go off and say, oh my God, in 6 months, she's going to know more than anybody else. Because she was like asking all the right questions and just pulling it in. And that's real. And she's just a phenomenal producer on sort of every level, you know, financial, creative, social, everything. Well, it's true. And but it also just shows, I think, what others can do too, which is that, you know, if you want to take those risks and you can pull in from others, there's not a lot stopping you.
I just had a thought while you guys were, sorry, go ahead, Brent.
I was going to say, I was really impressed that you were able to bring Olivia Colman on board as your narrator. Can you tell us a little bit about how she got involved in the project?
Well, you know, the thing about being a casting director for so long is that, you know, I still have a lot of relationships with people.
But that's only because I'm just going to say one more thing, which is a lot of executives, when they leave their position, no one ever wants to talk to them again. And so it was also because in your job, you always treated people right, so they would still talk to you when you were no longer in that job.
And I was also casting for 7 years after I left Disney. I had my own, I only stopped casting in 2017 because we were spending so much time traveling and it was getting to be ridiculous, you know, driving around the mountains of Haiti, you know, with an iPad trying to watch auditions, you know.
Yeah.
But, you know, in the backseat of a bumpy van, but I, you know, I've kept a lot of relationships just because I'm that kind of person. And so when we were deciding, you know, we really wanted to have a narrator of some kind of, you know, stature. And I put a list together of people, and, you know, obviously Olivia Colman really just was like, you couldn't imagine. And then but she wasn't initially, so I just reached out to her representation. And, you know, and she wasn't available, but then somebody said, well, just try. And then Jeff wrote a really beautiful letter, as he always does. He does his homework, and he knew that Olivia had been very involved in a lot of human rights activities. I mean, she's very active in the human rights world, actually. And so, you know, we wrote a letter, and through the letter, I was able to, you know, get the letter seen by her agents in London. And they sent it over, and, you know, 48 hours later, they called and said she wants to do it. She just needs to, she can get cleared from, you know, the Crown, you know, to do it. And then she did it. And then fortunately, I'll tell you two little things. One, I always say, like, you know, as a casting director, when you're doing this for other people, you know, I was, you know, my motto was, you know, casting is the solution, not the problem. And I was always, you know, the voice of reason and comfort and everything. So, you know, I know the realities but I know the realities of people saying yes and no to things. And when you're producing and casting for yourself, it's much because of those realities. I couldn't sleep. I was so anxious until it was all incredible, until it was worked out. I can't even tell, I really was so anxious because I knew what could or could not happen. And she was someone we really, really wanted for our film. And it was so incredible. And what was really incredible was she'd been on holiday with her family, and she had to come home and do like PR. So she went on holiday, she came home and she did PR. And then she had one day off, which was, she had fittings for season 4 because on the Monday she was going back. So Friday she had fittings. Monday she was starting season 4
of The Crown.
Of The Crown. And literally we sent a car for her, at 1 o'clock. She arrived at the studio in London at 2. Jeff worked with her for 3 hours. Car, went home, and then during the thing, her husband called at about 2:30. He says, "Where are you? We were supposed to have lunch with my mother today, or I think, So, and she did this. She just did this, and and the nicest, most incredible person, and she fit us in like the one afternoon off that she had. It was such an incredible gift to be given, and also we might say an incredible gift that we were given for the Untitled song by the marvelous composers.
Let's talk about that in a second.
Yeah.
I just want to say, are we allowed to swear on these podcasts, or should I censor?
Yeah, no.
Can I use the F word? Can I use the F word?
You can definitely use the F word.
I'll censor it, but you can fill in the gaps. So we're working with Olivia, and it's there's the engineer and me and the board, and then a glass screen, and then she's on the other side of the screen, and you go through it and you do it a whole bunch of times and you cut it all together later and all that stuff. But at one point she's just working her way through, and she reads some letter that Nasrin, or something, comment that Nasrin made, and she's got the paper here, and all of a sudden, and I could see her through the booth, and all of a sudden she puts down her paper, she goes, "Holy F, that's an amazing woman."
Oh,
and then gets her composer going, and then she goes back to reading, and I just thought, I love that. That's just amazing. The fact that they can come together across so much is
and Nasrin was so pleased, when she heard it. You have that instinct about why you want somebody to do it, and I think ultimately when we really heard it, all together, she's so on some level, even though she doesn't speak Farsi, she lives in another country, English accent. She's so on some level emotionally for us embodied Nasrin in some way, even though she's not Nasrin. It was incredible. I think that's she's so gifted, Olivia Colman, and I think in the way that she's able to convey, strength and vulnerability at the same time is, a great gift that she's got.
Absolutely.
Well, and the timing couldn't have been better too, with the way her career has taken off over the past couple of years as well. Between her Oscar and her television role and everything, she's just exploded over the past couple of years.
We hope that she gives us credit for casting her in our documentary.
He's joking.
I know he is. Yeah. We're going to be talking about her next week in The Father. It's going to be great. I had this thought when you were talking, Jeff, and maybe you guys can talk, because, and I don't know why it came to me, but we interviewed the widow of John Gillerman last week, and I thought, a documentary director and a big blockbuster director, and do you guys sit at separate tables when you go to these events? Is there a hierarchy, or do they just think, we're filmmakers, we're just creatives?
It's the age of COVID, so there are no tables.
No, I know, but you know what I mean. The virtual.
If you're at the New York Film Festival, or like Tribeca with our last film, you go back and forth. And I think hopefully we can both learn from each other. There's just so many, there's so many great films to learn from over time. And so it's not just the blockbusters of today or the small indies of today. I hope that people will explore great films of the past as well.
I think too, though, in the years, that I've been working with Jeff on docs, the last 8 years, the business has changed a lot. It is, I think, with the streamers and things, it's really changed a lot. And the documentary world's changed a lot, in terms of the attention and, the energy. Just look at the Academy Awards now.
Yeah.
These places, the Netflix and this, they're putting just as much money, or a lot of money now, into getting nominations for documentaries as they did for live action. And now how so many films are now, like 3 of the 5 documentaries are from other countries now, too. So, and there's a lot more interest in documentaries than there has than there's ever been before.
And I think one of the knocks I would make on a lot of contemporary films is that there's a lot of talent for filmmakers. I'm talking about narrative films, a lot of talent for filmmakers, but those filmmakers are not necessarily drawing from real life. Like, the generation of, say, Ben Hecht, they were reporters in Chicago. And so they had real life to draw on, and their stories were rooted in the crazy characters they knew in real life. And I think a lot of filmmakers, sadly, are 3rd or 4th generation watching TV shows and other movies. And so the storytelling comes out of that experience, not out of really being in the world. But interesting enough, this year, we have a number of really powerful films like Nomadland and Minori that are also rooted in this sense of realism.
Yeah.
The Sounds of Metal
The
too. I
Sound
mean,
of
that
Metal,
just feels
yeah.
like, you just feel,
That was
it
so
couldn't be
good.
more
Yeah.
good.
Yeah. We reviewed that last week. It was, or a couple weeks ago. It was excellent,
I thought
excellent
that
movie.
was extraordinary. He's a wonderful actor.
We want to make sure they're on the right side of Brent's, good movie list. But
Yeah. You
No, I
definitely,
mean,
you're hitting all our tops.
humanity, because people relate to humanity. I mean, people,
They do. Yeah.
what people are as human beings is very, very interesting.
Yeah,
We
when I
have a
started
minute left. I'm sorry. We only have like a minute left, and I wondered if I
we can
could
talk about whatever we want. We can stay.
Well, I just
as long as
wanted,
we want.
like-
I don't have I'm my own person. Nobody owns.
I just have to say you're great, and the fact that you picked up on the Japanese connection to Floating World Pictures, gets you a Nasrin T-shirt.
Woo! Okay.
But I just want to go back to the fact that Nasrin right now is on a temporary leave from prison because of Nowruz. It's the Iranian New Year. But there are so many political prisoners in Iran and around the world who need our attention. I was just reading about this political prisoner, Ahmadreza Dajjali, who we've talked about before. He's an Iranian Swedish scientist who had gone to Iran in 2017. He's a medical disaster expert, and he'd gone to Iran many times. And he was invited to this conference to talk about disaster medicine in Iran, and he got arrested while he was there. They said he was a spy for the Israelis, which is just
God.
And he's been held in solitary confinement for 100 days. They have a light on his room at all times, so he can never sleep. He's sentenced to death, and he's wasting away in this tiny cell in Evin Prison.
Sounds like the Mauritanian, doesn't it, Brent?
I was just going to say, I mean, that movie,
Yeah.
that again, I thought his performance was amazing because you really feel what that must really be like.
Yes, and that's a wonderful film. But I'm just saying that there's so many people who need our attention right now.
Yep.
This is very real. And that's what Nasrin is about, trying to make real in a very personal way.
Yeah.
One champion of human rights whose life is at risk. And if we can get her out of prison, it's not just changing her life, but it could be transformative for her country.
Yeah.
And if it's transformative for her country, it can be transformative for the world. And so we hope that people will care about Nasrin and others like her and get involved, because it is movies, but it's also life.
Yeah.
And it couldn't be more important.
Yes, absolutely. Here. Yes, yes to all of it. When I started the Good Radio Network, I had taken a year off, and I didn't know it, wasn't feeling it, and I said, what can I do? And I had this download from the universe, and it said, go find one person who's making a difference. And because people would just say, well, what can I do? I'm only one person, and I'm like, one person can make a huge difference. And when I saw a commercial for the global goals, United Nations global goals, and I thought, yeah, we can start to invite people who are intimately helping those global goals. We've got those 18 or 19 goals now, and I mean, every country in the world except for one said yes, we're in, and we're coming up to their time limit on those years, and I'm thinking, this is one of them. Violence against women and all of that stuff is part of the United Nations global goals. And how can people vote against that? And how can we help them, meet those goals? And so I think when you meet a Nasrin, there's one person who's making a huge difference. It's like, if you think a mosquito can't be, be in a room with that kind of thing, can't make a difference. So all of these films that you do, and all of these people that you focus on, are more than one. They're like magnified by thousands, when people can perspective can see that and go, oh, I can see me there now, or I can see somebody else, and I get it. So thank you for making these films.
Oh
well, you're welcome. I mean, it's the purpose of life is having a purpose, and you know, for us, it's, you know, it gives our lives a lot of meaning. And I think, you know, I mean, each one of these films has been life-changing for me in different ways. I mean, you can imagine, as you know, I've met a lot of very interesting people
Yes.
over my course of my career and been involved in a lot of interesting projects. And I'm very thrilled and honored to have had that life experience, but meeting people completely outside my personal experience, doing things that, you know, in this selfless way, it's really something.
It definitely is.
Mm.
Okay, well, I guess we're on time now. So, Jeff, unless you had something else you want to say.
I know. Can I mention one other thing too
Yeah.
before we go, which is that, you know, one of the things that's been really important is this impact campaign that we've been having, that we started in October. You
Yep.
know, we realize that as wonderful as film festivals are, you know, they're not the same as impact events because people are always rushing off to the next movie. And we wanted the film to, you know, have an impact and address what you're just talking about. How can we make a difference? And so, you know, so we've had quite a lot of wonderful impact events all over the world, across the United States. We just had one in Canada this past week. We spoke before the European Parliament. So,
Nice.
you know, also if people visit our website and they want to host an impact event, you know, bring it to their organization, you know, that's also very useful because that, you know, people put out statements and there are people that care about this subject matter. And so then they do take actions. And so again, it's on our website if people wish to do that.
And what is that website, Marcia?
Oh, it's www.nasrinfilm.com.
There we go.
What was that again?
Nasrinfilm.com.
Nasrinfilm.com. We will put a big block letters. Did you have anything you'd like to add before we go?
Yeah, I was going to say, and in addition to websites, my review of Nasrin will be posted on my website, www.brentmarchant.com, probably tomorrow.
Oh, wonderful.
That's so exciting. Thank you so much.
Oh,
I have to say, you both have been just great. It's such a nice conversation, and we appreciate where your hearts are. And
no, it's great because, you know, we've been doing them and, you know, it's after a while you feel like, oh, you're just saying, you know, you have to be careful. You don't want to say the same things over and over
I know.
again. I mean, there are some very specific questions and you answer them, but I think you touched on so many good things.
I don't watch other people's interviews before I interview, and I don't use questions that people send me. So I just do my own thing. And I find that it's a little more interesting for you if you don't have to go, you know, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, I know the answers to everything. Like, it's just for everybody involved. I just admit, though, I'm just going to say goodbye, Facebook.